Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Baird with TierPoint, and we're very happy to welcome you today to our webinar, Ready for AI, Building a Secure and Governed Foundation for Microsoft Copilot. I want to go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping first. This is a 45-minute webinar, and we will have room for Q&A towards the end. So do use the Q&A feature, and we will go ahead and save those questions towards the end. If we don't get to your questions, we will go ahead and follow up afterwards. This is a recorded webinar, so we will make it available after the event. And again, if you have any questions at any time, you can use the chat feature. I can answer those questions for you, and then we will get our speakers ready for your questions towards the end. So our speakers today are Mike Grondahl of TierPoint and Tim Walton of Microsoft. Mike is a principal cloud solutions architect with 20 years experience plus 20 years experience, 20 plus, designing secure, scalable cloud environments. He helps organizations modernize their data platforms, strengthen cloud security, and build AI-ready architectures across Azure. Tim has been with Microsoft for over 26 years, and he is also a principal, but he's a principal partner solution architect. And he works with organizations on cloud, AI, data, and security strategy. Tim brings deep expertise in helping enterprises operationalize AI initiatives securely and at scale with a focus on Microsoft Fabric, which we'll be talking about today, governance, and modern AI platforms. He regularly advises organizations on how to move from AI experimentation to real business outcomes, which we'll talk about today as well, while maintaining strong security and compliance foundations. So I'm going to let these two guys do most of the talking today, and then I'm going to come back for the Q&A. But let me go ahead and first start this, set the stage, and then ask the first question. So we know everyone's interested in AI. There's no shortage of that. And most organizations already have initiatives well underway, including TierPoint. But what we consistently see at the executive level is plenty of activity without consistent measurable outcomes. So it's not a technology issue. It's the combination of rising AI demand, fragmented data, and rising security expectations. That's the gap we will focus on today. How to move from experimentation to real business impact with the right foundation and guardrails. What's driving your AI priority most right now? Is it growth, efficiency, or risk reduction? So, Tim, to kick us off, what are you seeing across executive teams right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew. I would say, we're in an inflection point with AI. There was a lot of our experimentation. It was AI to assist you. Now, what most of our advanced customers are doing are becoming what we call frontier. And what frontier means is the business itself brings in AI to all of its workflows. It designs the workflows around that agentic design, and that is driving huge shifts and business outcomes. You actually highlighted one of the best practices, right? When you're doing AI, and you said, Andrew, initiatives, sometimes they're called use cases, they must have some kind of measurable business outcome, right? Some kind of ROI. And so becoming frontier means that you adopt AI and you put it into your organization. And we've got quite a few customers that are doing this and embracing this frontier success framework. And there's like four things that they're doing, right? And this is general initiatives, right, Andrew, that they do, which is first of all, enrich employee experiences. You can think of things like, maybe using Copilot or Co-work, and you're actually enriching the employee. You're not doing some mundane task. Um, you can reinvent your customer engagement. We see this a lot across all of our customers. So changing that customer engagement, whether it's support or customer success with AI. And then the third one, and probably affects your organization and your P&L the most, is reshaping your business processes. Um, that's a huge one that you can actually really measure, and it can affect your P&L. And then finally, bending the curve on innovation. So this is where you may be developing a net new product, a net new service with AI. And some great examples. So for example, Children International, using enri targeting and enriching their employee experience, they used AI and they integrated AI and agentic solutions into their customer workflows. And basically that give them time to work directly with the children, right? That's critical. That's their mission statement. So that again is a business outcome that affects the mission statement. I want to get the numbers right here. They're on track to increase direct child interventions by 25%. So a huge outcome. And again, that goes to their mission statement. For in reinventing customer engagement, Alaska Airlines again is using AI for that customer connection. Um, that resulted them in the numbers are pretty good. It in their brand love is now at 90% guest satisfaction rating. And really what they did was incorporate multiple systems with AI and sort of agendified those workflows to automate, triaging of any issues, any answers that for the customer in real time. Good example of reshaping business processes is actually Levi's. Yes, I'm wearing denim right now. They had an issue when they went to direct to consumer on the finance side of things. So, thinking about their ERP systems, etc. And it was just taking way too long. So they agendified that finance piece. It's actually one of the first things that Microsoft focused on too. And they increased their financial operations by 97%, right? So huge impact there. And then the final thing, bend curve on innovation. This is actually a partner that I work with, Accenture. So they're using AI and those workflows to work with their end customers, which results in when they work with the customers to develop a solution for a scenario or initiative, they have reduced that time by 50% and actually lowered the cost by 20%. So big changes all over. That is the number one thing is embracing that AI and putting it into your business flow. So with that, we'll go over what the agenda is for today and how you can get to become a frontier customer. Mike?
Yes, sir. So, as Andrew mentioned, there's no shortage of AI activity right now, but not always measurable outcomes. What we're going to talk through today is how to change that. We'll run this as 3 acts with one outcome, an AI-ready data estate that you can trust and scale. The reason we structure is this way is this is where most organizations get stuck. Most teams don't struggle with the idea of AI. They struggle with connecting these 3 pieces, and that's where things start to break. Act 1 is the foundation, simplifying how data is organized and reused. Act 2 is trust, making governance and security defaults instead of afterthoughts. And Act 3 is execution, turning AI into a repeatable program with clear ownership and adoption. And most teams usually start with one of these, but they stall because all 3 aren't aligned. And before we get into what the solution looks like, it's worth grounding in what's actually happening in most environments today.
Excellent.
So, because when you look across most organizations, there are a few consistent forces driving this challenge. So, Tim, you're seeing this across a lot of customers. What are the main forces you're seeing drive this right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this slide actually covers most of what I'm seeing, right? I mean, clearly, right, AI, everybody wants to utilize it. They may be using consumer grade AI tools, right? Heaven forbid, Mike, and maybe leaking some important intellectual property out into a consumer-based model. But everybody wants to get at it, and so you really want to sort of empower them in a very structured way. So how do we deal with that demand? And then there's this, and we'll go deep into this very, the data that you have, that is you as a customer, that is your IP, right, Mike? That is your differentiated value proposition, and it's all over. Could be in Excel spreadsheets, it could be in SharePoint, it could be in many different databases, it could be in a SaaS application. And that data sprawl is a problem, right? How do we get all that together and make it sort of actionable? So we'll talk about that. And then from a compliance and an IT function, a security function is how do I know what people are using? How do I know I'm not the next Samsung and I've just leaked our internal prices, right, to the public, right? How do I do it in a well-governed way that's observable, has that governance, risk, and compliance? These are probably the three things, right, as you've got on the slide, Mike, that executives think about all the time.
Right. So before we get into solutions, this is what we're typically walking into. So most organizations aren't blocked by ideas, they're blocked by structure. And you've got fragmentation, multiple data copies, multiple pipelines, and teams getting different answers to the same question. You've got missing business context where AI is looking at tables, not customers, orders, or risk. You got governance laid on after the fact. So controls don't actually follow the data. And then you got agent sprawl, where pilots are multiplying faster than they can be tracked or governed. And at the executive level, this shows up pretty clearly. Slower decisions, higher risk, and stalled AI initiatives. If leaders don't trust the data, they're not going to trust the AI, and that's where scale stops. So which of these gaps show up most for you today? So Tim, from your perspective, what does the foundation need to look like when this is simplified?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great slide because this is essentially what, Fabric does. And actually, a few of the technologies we'll go over today is we wanted to address each one of these in a very pointed fashion to deal with fragmentation. So, in other words, to unify, to get business semantics out of that data. And we wanted to be zero trust, right? Meaning security is, well, it's actually our priority number one at Microsoft. So it cannot be a bolt-on, right? So the solution ultimately will be Fabric and some other tooling that addresses all of those four things. And so we'll go through that today in the presentation.
Right. So let's start with the foundation, because this is where everything either starts to scale or starts to break. Before AI can scale, and more importantly, before it can be trusted at scale, the data layer has to be simplified. And what we consistently see is this. Organizations don't struggle with access to data. They struggle with consistency of data. So different teams are working off different definitions, different pipelines, different versions of the truth. And when that happens, two things follow very quickly. AI becomes unreliable and trust breaks down. The goal of the foundation isn't to centralize everything. It's to create a shared operating model where data is consistent, reusable, and understood the same way across the organization. When that foundation is in place, everything else accelerates. Analytics, governance, and ultimately AI adoption. And that's exactly what platforms like Fabric are designed to solve. Tim, from what you're seeing, how are organizations actually using Fabric to simplify that foundation in practice?
Yeah, awesome. If you go to that next slide and we'll talk about it and what they're actually using. So Fabric, right? Ultimately, when we saw those four, sort of problem statements, is one thing we have a way to unify that data platform. So when you look at this uh, first thing, One Lake, what we're seeing there is you now have a way to unify all of that data. And so when I say all of that data, and Mike, you sort of pointed this out earlier, what I mean by that is, and just to reflect on it, that's a lot of data, right? Like you got to think about if you're a customer, you've got an ERP platform, you've probably got some kind of customer service, maybe ServiceNow. You may have, for your ERP platform, maybe you're using SAP, right? For your CRM, maybe you're using Salesforce, right? And then there's all sorts of databases that you may be using internally, right, in your organization, like SQL, maybe Postgres, maybe you're using OneDrive and SharePoint. So what Fabric wants to do is unify all of those things. So it supports obviously natively all of Microsoft's data stores, right? And business apps such as Business Central or our ERP system, Dynamics, and our sales platform. But it also supports other data platforms. So, for example, it natively supports SAP, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Teradata. Palantir, if you're using that, Esri, Epic, all of these SaaS platforms natively with no ETL, no plumbing you have to do, you can pull that data into one lake and then begin to sort of report on that with one viewpoint. Um, some of my customers, I'll give you an example of a smaller customer that was they basically are a dealership for Sprinter vans, like the Mercedes Sprinter van. Um, and they wanted a dashboard that would unify from the CFO's perspective, what does their fleet look like? Are they making money? Do they need to make adjustments to the fleet? And in order to do that, right, team, they have to unify a whole bunch of different platforms. They had the Mercedes-Benz, um, SaaS system that they were using. They use Carfax. They have the telematics that are coming from the cars, how much they're using the brakes, etc., and all of this. So there was probably about 10 different SaaS applications that they were using. And with Fabric, we were able to bring all of that and give a unified view where he could do a way better job of managing that fleet. Previously, right, team? I mean, I would say even just like a few years ago, you were probably doing a lot of X lookups in Excel from, right, Mike? Maybe 20 different data sources, and we want to get to the point where, from a corporate viewpoint, we've unified that data platform, right?
Yeah.
And we do this as a SaaS application, so you're not dealing with the complexity of infrastructure as a service. It's a total SaaS platform, and it unifies the compute across all different workloads, whether it's Lakehouse, maybe you have a traditional data warehouse, right? Maybe you want to get real-time intelligence coming from the shop floor. So, for example, Walmart uses this for their supply chain, so they've got real time. They can actually do re predict and react to things that are happening in the supply chain. Um, and then AI is actually built into it, meaning when certain things happen, and we'll get into this when we talk about Fabric IQ, the data agents can predict what's about to happen and take action on behalf of it. And then finally, Fabric has this security and governance built in, and we'll go deep into what that means.
And also, Tim,
So,
just to touch
just to summarize, I'm sorry, Mike, was that a question?
yeah, no, just a quick touch on One Lake. One thing that I found, the most advantageous is that you have all your data in one place in the same format. And it doesn't mean that you have to, migrate your data to the one lake, but you can use, shortcuts and mirroring solutions to have one single pane of glass for all your data, which also helps obviously for security to check for lineage and all those good things.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Mike. I'm glad you brought that up because it even supports things that are on-prem, right?
Right.
It supports data that's on-prem too. I mean, if you're somebody like Walmart, you probably have a lot of servers in each of your stores that you need to get that data, and so it supports that. It's a great point, right? And being able to get to that one place, especially from a operations and from a financial perspective, is a great thing.
Yeah.
So hopefully that addresses it. Fabric, it gets you to have that AI powered data platform. That's what we're trying to do as simply as possible, with a lot less plumbing. That's what really Fabric is there for.
So this is a useful way to think about context. Agents work best when they're grounded in the same shared truth across people, knowledge, and operational data. When those are aligned, AI becomes consistent and reliable. But when they're not, results start to drift across teams and tools. Tim, this is where the model really comes together. Can you walk through how these three layers actually work together in practice and what that looks like for organizations as they scale?
Yeah, it's good to sort of pause here, right, Mike? Because, we call this the Microsoft IQ, right? And so this is how we surface the various different types of data. But ultimately, it's you, the customer, it is your IQ. So when you think of things like work IQ, that's about how you do work, who you're working with. So your teams, your roles, your workflows of getting day-to-day work done, all that information is kept, and that is in work IQ. When you look at fabric IQ, that's actually the operational state of the business, right? We're getting data from CRM, we're getting data from your ERP system. We can actually see how the business is doing, right? And then finally, Foundry is essentially this curated knowledge. So imagine teams. So when you're in work IQ, I produce many artifacts, right? Maybe I create a PowerPoint or an email. Is that the real truth? Not necessarily, right? It may eventually become through the workflow truth. So when you think about Fabric and Foundry, that is the business opinion of what that truth is at that moment, the source of truth. Work IQ is where I can get to say, hey, who did I spend some time with? Last Friday, I had a meeting. Who was on there? What were my action items, right? So it's about getting your work done. Hopefully that clears things, but these things are critically important. Without this IQ, doesn't matter what model you use, the best model's always changing every month, right? That's why we give you a choice. Um, doesn't matter what model you use, if you don't get it access and context to each of these IQs, your AI will not be intelligent. It's just, it won't be deterministic. It's gonna sort of, I think this is what you need. And so this layer is very, very critical. Does that help, Mike?
Yep,
Yep,
definitely.
definitely.
So now
So
let's
now let's
shift to trust, because this is where most organizations slow down, even after they've invested in the platform. AI only scales when governance and security are built in, not bolted on later.
Well, Mike, I think we missed there was the fabric IQ is pretty critical. I just want to go over this. This is
Sure.
important,
Sorry about my
folks.
bad.
Yeah, this is important because I want to show you why this is important. And Mike, you actually did t touch upon it, right? What does fabric IQ do that a typical right semantic model does not, right, Mike? And you
Yeah.
hit on it. We have, if you saw all of the data that you can pull in, the idea that you said, Mike, what is the idea of a customer? Or what is the idea of risk? It's totally different on depending on which data source.
Hmm.
What Fabric IQ allows you to do is put a business definition over your data. So when you ask questions and when data is changing, AI can take over or it can recommend actions. So for example, like if we look at this first one, the retail example, if we look at that, let's see. Here, when it says the logistics cost spike, right? Because it understands all the different pieces of data in this retail business, it can now follow the flow of data, right? Agent identifies a cost spike, attributes to a region and a SKU, and proposes routing change. See how Fabric IQ can make an AI do something. That is because you have defined that as a business. It now knows the relation between region and SKU, etc. Same with financial services, right? If you look at counterparty exposure, right? Meaning the buy sell of a trade or whatever. Um, Again, Fabric IQ can say what is the instrument, what is the counterparty, who's the counterparty. It's been a while since I've been doing a Series 7, and it can look at that and then be able to do actionable things on risk, right? Manufacturing. If you remember, we can get real-time data coming in, and this is essentially, Walmart uses this. I think we've got many manufacturing where they're bringing that data in. This is shop floor data. Does that really mean anything to the business? Well, absolutely. And that Fabric IQ gets that data and then maps it to meaning of the business, right? Like, are we going to be able to ship on time, etc., right? Are we getting behind? Do we need to redirect to another manufacturing plant? Things like this. That's what Fabric IQ is able to do. It moves your data so now agents can sort of be proactive and predict things. Hopefully that clears that up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, so let's get back to this slide. So as I touched on earlier, what we consistently see is this. Organizations get the data foundation in place, but they hesitate to scale because they're not fully confident in the controls. And when that happens, two things follow very quickly. Teams move slower and risk concerns start to increase. So trust is the unlock that allows organizations to move fast without increasing risk or creating blind spots for leadership. Because without trust, organizations slow down even when the technology is ready. So this is where it becomes practical for organizations. Fabric and Purview together give you visibility and control across both your data and your AI. And for executives, this really comes down to three things: knowing what exists, what it's doing, and who's accountable for it. On the data side, that's catalog, classification, lineage, and policy. On the AI side, it's understanding what copilots and agents are in use, what they are accessing, and how they're being used. And when governance becomes visible like this, it shifts from something that slows teams down into something that actually enables them to move faster. So, Tim, let's take one step further because this is where it becomes real from a security and operations perspective.
Yeah, this is a great slide, right? So again, Microsoft's perspective is you got to take zero trust, right? So if you look at the beginning, it says enter agent ID. What that essentially means is it's like we're making agents, AI agents, an identity within your organization, right? Just like an employee. So that gives us a true managed identity. It allows this auditable, right, and revocable scope, right? Because we have role-based access, now we can say this agent has access to this, etc., etc. So zero trust, you can't do anything if you don't have an identity, right? That's a big thing. And now you can control that identity and agent. Now, when you think about Defender for Cloud, we're just looking at runtime protection of all those AI workloads that are maybe in Azure, etc., right? And it's looking at that telemetry. Is something being utilized wrong? Do we have a rogue department running Claude code and exporting everything out to the world, right? So that helps with that. And then Purview AI Hub, we just renamed this, but this is about the visibility of how you're using data. So one thing that doesn't get enough press is our data loss prevention, right? And Microsoft's um, securing of data. I don't know, maybe some of you have used this, but you can actually secure your document and say, hey, this is for employees only. And when that document or data gets outside of your organization, it's actually sealed in an envelope, encrypted, and can only be opened by an employee in your company to be viewed, right? And so you can do that. That's really, and actually you can track where that goes. You can actually do a fingerprint on it to see. Some people say, well, I could just share my screen, right? Well, actually it will actually have an identity on there so we know who leaked whatever that information is. It's very, very powerful. And great partners like TierPoint can help you get that set up. And then Sentinel is basically our security operations center. I think we're doing like trillions of security signals every single day is going through this. And all of this together is the data that allows you to secure AI and essentially your whole company. And we do this through what we call Agent 365. That's the control plane, right, for orchestrating identity, policy protection, and signals across all AI agents, whether they're from us, whether they've come from another vendor, they're in another cloud, doesn't matter. You can control all of that at your organization level. That just GA'd and is extremely powerful and something that, for all of you here, you should really look at. So what it contains is a registry. So every agent that you want your organizations to use, you can put it in that registry so it's discoverable. It has the access control, what agents can access what data. That's because, again, from that identity. It gives you a visualization of which agents are being used by who. And then obviously the security piece that we just went over is embedded into Agent 365. And so this observability, right, team, is really critical because ultimately, what are we doing? We're trying to get a business outcome. I want observability on what have I done in that AI, who's using it, and what ROI am I getting out of it? If we can't do that, we're sort of guessing like, well, I think it worked well, right? With Agent 365, it give you that observability, right? And that ability to say, hey, here's the ROI that we got. So like some of those customer reference, that's because they're essentially using Agent 365 to get that data.
So this is what it looks like when it all comes together. So at the core, you have your data, your semantic layer, and your agents running inside Fabric. And then wrapped around that, you have a consistent security model across the entire environment. So for leadership, this outcome is simple. You have one identity model, one policy framework, and one audit trail across both your data and your AI. Instead of stitching together controls across different tools and platforms, it becomes a single, consistent operating model. And that's what allows organizations to scale AI with confidence not cautiously. Now let's talk about execution, because this is where most organizations struggle. Not because the technology doesn't work, but because it's not yet repeatable inside the organization. What we consistently see is this. Teams prove the first use case, but then they struggle to scale the second and third. And that's where AI starts to stall, not on capability, but on execution. Execution, not ideas, is what separates organizations experimenting with AI from those actually turning it into a business capability. And that's exactly what a center of excellence is designed to solve. Now, this is what actually looks like in practice. Without a center of excellence, this is the pattern we consistently see. Pilots multiply, but the value plateaus. Every team starts building their own approach, so nothing is standardized. Security and governance get applied after the fact, which slows everything down. And teams end up stretched, constantly shifting priorities without a consistent way to scale. What we consistently see is the second use case is harder than the first, because nothing was designed to be reusable. But when a COE is in place, that pattern flips. Execution becomes standardized, proven patterns get reused. You're operating on one platform with governance built in from the start. And teams are aligned around outcomes, not tools. That's how you move from scattered pilots to a system that consistently produces results. What we found is these 5 pillars consistently show up in organizations that actually scale AI, not just experimenting with it. You have the strategy and experience. You start with one clear business outcome, not do AI everywhere, but where it matters most, and design how AI fits directly into how your teams work. Then you standardize on a platform. Otherwise, every team builds their own stack and you never scale. This is what turns projects into a capability. And a data foundation. This is usually the constraint. If the data isn't unified and understood the same way across the business, AI produces inconsistent results. And security has to be built in from day one. Identity, policy, and auditability, so you can move fast without increasing risk. And finally, adoption. Because even with everything in place, if people don't use it, it doesn't scale. The key is this: these don't need equal maturity, but they do need to stay connected. Because whichever one lags becomes the bottleneck. The operating model is what actually makes all this work. Because at this point, the question isn't, can we do AI? It's who owns it and who it actually gets delivered across the business. What we see most often is that ownership isn't always clear. You have IT driving the platform, data teams focused on models, security focused on risk, and the business focused on outcomes. And without alignment, things either slow down or they start moving in different directions. So what works is a simple but very intentional structure. Executive sponsors set direction and priorities, and more importantly, they own the outcomes. A central team defines the standards, the platform, and the guardrails, and then delivery is federated, so business units can move quickly within those guardrails. That's how you get speed without losing control. This is where it becomes real in terms of execution. What I want to show here is not a theoretical roadmap, but the pattern we see actually work within the first 90 days. So this isn't theoretical. This is the pattern we see work repeatedly. In the first 30 days, the focus is alignment. Getting clear on the business outcome, understanding where you are today, and putting some initial structure around governance and ownership. From day 30 to 60, that's where you move into execution. You stand up the platform, you put the security baselines in place, and most importantly, you deliver 1 or 2 real use cases. Then from 60 to 90 days, it shifts to scale. You bring in a second part of the business, move those use cases into production, and start building the adoption model around it. So at the end of 90 days, you're not walking away with another pilot. You get a measurable outcome and a repeatable way to deliver the next one. What this really comes down to is simplifying the path forward. So if you take nothing else away, it comes down to 3 decisions. First, pick a single business outcome that actually matters. Second, align on one data foundation to support it. And third, put the trust model in place from day one. Once those 3 are aligned, AI stops being a set of experiments and starts becoming a real business capability. And importantly, you don't have to take this on alone or absorb it all upfront. Between TierPoint and Microsoft, there are often funding and co-investment options available to help accelerate these first steps without delaying the effort. But Tim, from Microsoft's perspective, what does it take to make sure organizations don't try to do this alone and actually scale this successfully?
Yeah, great slides, Mike. Team, if you're watching this, that whole idea of a COE, and please don't, sometimes when people say center of excellence, they think it's like you're going to get bogged down in a whole bunch of policies and procedures. That is not the point. If you looked at his slides, it's basically about doing what you do right now on the business and sort of implementing that in AI, right? And so that advice works on any technology. I think we had some places in there, Mike, where it says Fabric. Well, put in another data platform. Well, that's unified, right? I don't know, maybe Snowflake or whatever. That advice is technology agnostic, right? So it's great advice. You asked me, like, I would absolutely say do not do this alone, right? I mean, if you look at, I think AT&T, I think they're up to over 700 use cases. That's a lot. They've got a lot of business processes, right, Mike, that they've got to update. They work with partners like TierPoint to get these things done from an acceleration point of view. Microsoft, I think we have about $800 million in funding that we go and give to partners to help customers get these things done. That's how much we believe in it. It's actually interesting. And that money is given out based on, guess what it is, Mike? There you have it right here, business outcome. Because if the business outcome is great, like let's say for healthcare, we change patient outcomes. Absolutely. We're going to invest as much money as we can to do that. And we want to measure the outcome. We don't want you to adopt a technology and simply get nothing out of it. It doesn't affect your mission statement or your P&L as it stays on here. I mean, I'll give a great example. A customer that's local to me, they were starting to adopt AI. They're sort of a manufacturer. And with the new policies for overtime, it was going to become a very complicated thing to do it. They use Workday. I had the head of HR had to do some reporting, etc. And so they're like, he's a friend of mine. He said, well, I don't know how to do it. And so I was trying to help. And I said, well, why don't you get a partner to help you? Partner went out there, spent 2 weeks with him. They got integrated Workday. He was able to do his reports and actually project what that would mean for the company. Within 2 weeks, he had a fully functional production level system for the new policies. And guess what? he didn't pay anything. The partner came in for free, did all that. I'm not saying that's always going to be the case, but that's what happened. And the thing you got to understand about partners know how to sort of execute. You, as a business, have the knowledge, right? The partner that was in there might not even known about the policy change that the government just made, right, for overtime. The HR person at that company knew that and how it would affect his organization. Those two people working together, you can get it done faster. So I would absolutely say, hey, let's get some help. It's not about outsourcing all of your AI capabilities to another organization. It's about getting help and getting it done fast.
All right.
And
Hi guys, so I'm back. We have made it to the Q&A portion of the webinar today. So thanks again, Mike and Tim, for a great overview for AI readiness. And again, for those folks that are ready to take the next step, you can use the QR code here, or you can use the link that I've dropped in the chat for a Fabric Copilot strategy session. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at our questions that have come in. I have one here. That is for you, I think, Tim. And then, Mike, you can certainly jump in if you'd like to as well. What are you seeing as the biggest mistake organizations make when starting AI initiatives? And you may have already said it 100 times, but I'm curious, what's your take?
Yeah, I think it still happens. That do a science project and it's not relatable to a business outcome or their mission statement or the P&L. Like, focus on that, right? Top scenario right now we're seeing is order to cash. How do I get an order to cash as quickly as possible? Affects the P&L, right? That I would say is the the biggest mistake. Alignment to business, as Mike has been saying all the time, that has to happen, right?
Mike, anything that you're seeing?
yeah, also you need to make sure that the data that you have is correct, because if the data isn't correct, the responses would be wrong. That's the one of the really good things with the One Lake that we touched on earlier, that you have all data in one place, and you can make sure that data is correct. You can actually what you do is you go in and clean your data, and you have three different versions of the bronze, silver, and gold. So you make sure that when you query any data at all, that data is it's up to date, and it's correct, because bad things in produces bad things out.
That's right. Data is the fuel of AI, and it better
It
be
is.
right, or it could be really bad fuel, and the engine's then broke.
And you want to make sure you secure that data as well, so it does not get tampered with. Because again, if someone tampers with your data, it's not going to be correct.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up, right? Like even now, I think on SharePoint, you can flag a SharePoint site as authoritative
Yep.
data. So it boosts when you're using something like Copilot. It'll say, okay, this is the system of record. This is truth. I'm going to state this. But yes, again, it's like the business outcome and have that sort of embedded holistic strategy, which you sort of went over, Mike, is the frontier COE. Some people call it innovation hub. JD Meyer would say it should be an innovation hub. But yeah, I think that best practices without a doubt.
Yeah.
I have another one here, just off the cuff. I think where should organizations start if they're interested in AI, but they don't have a formal strategy yet? I mean, I'm sure many people, including myself and just about everyone, is already dabbling in it. But now that the organization's ready to catch up, what should they do, to start?
I would say start with an assessment, because like Tim touched on, also you need to actually align the business needs and outcomes with how you use your AI, right? So Uh, Starting with an assessment that we would be happy to help with, we can go in and uh, evaluate first of all your data readiness, as we touched on, making sure all data is in one place, making sure you're not having old stale data that you don't have any need for, uh, looking at the security for sure from the start, so it's not an afterthought, and uh, and then build a roadmap from there.
Tim, anything to add up to that?
Yeah, that was great. I see some questions coming in. Right, Andrew, some of these are really good. We should have given a prize for the best question.
Yeah, let's you want to go ahead and address one of the questions out there.
Yeah, I think is it Chris Jennings is asking, what are the
Yeah.
best tools to ingest your data? Well, as I said on Fabric, we have thousands of connectors, so we probably do support wherever you're getting the data from or the database. Um, the example I gave of the Mercedes-Benz dealership, like there wasn't really a way to do Carfax. Obviously, the Mercedes-Benz SaaS is proprietary, but we got that done in a week. In the back end where we're using data factory, et cetera, and all that to do that. But we using AI and agentic, we're able to do those custom connectors, within hours. So is it hard? No. Again, work with a partner, or there's Microsoft Learn. You can see how that's done. Potentially use co-work. It will help you get that done. It will identify the APIs and then infer the data that can be ingested. Um, it's much easier than it used to be, right, Chris? Like back in the day, 26 years of Microsoft. I'm going back to VB and maybe Access databases here, folks. Um, uh, it was difficult then. Now it's not. Especially as Mike said, with all of this data connectors that we have and the mirroring. I mean, Chris, check this out. Background in financial services. Most of them are still on a mainframe, right? I'm talking COBOL 85, Nscribe database, right? DB2, right, Mike?
Yeah.
You can real-time mirror that into Fabric. No work. It's amazing. Think about the power of that. So that was a great question, Chris. I did not want to make it overly complicated. Especially with the connectors, it's zero ETL. Don't have to do it. Custom, even that's much easier than it was before. And then was another question. Um, if you have a client who wants to upgrade to a cloud-hosted upgrade but is outdated, would it be better to still use it? I should be saying this out loud. Use it for AI Fabric and Fabric IQ. Sorry if this is a stupid question. It's not a stupid question. So you have a computerized maintenance management system. Yeah, this is actually a good question, right? Some people say, like, should I just put it in Fabric or should I, have it, right, Mike, and do the mirror or do the copy?
Mhm.
And it depends on the scenario, Paula. That's a great question. Like,
Yeah.
so let's say it was Dynamics ERP, right? Or Business Central. I'd still want the data in Business Central, but for reporting and actually even maybe real-time analytics, I'd want it in Fabric, right? So that the business rules that are in that system and maybe in your computerized maintenance management system still hold true. You don't want to duplicate those. But to Mike's point, you want that unified view of data. And actually, that might be a really good system, especially from an IT perspective on, automating a whole bunch of things. So that's a great question. I like that one. I wish I had an Xbox now to give out now, you see? We should have got the Xboxes.
All
Yeah,
right.
there's how much an assessment typically cost. I will allow TierPoint to address that. Oh, what is
So,
this one? Exactly, me too.
so the cost of the assessment, it depends on a few different factors. The size of the environment, size of the engagement, and all those good things. So that's more on a case by case cost for it. So, but if you reach out, we can definitely help you with that and give you a good answer once we have a little bit more information in regards to your environment.
But certainly starting the conversation is free. So we would love to be able to chat through even and answer some of the basic questions that you have. So don't be afraid to reach out. We have reached the end of today's webinar time. So if anyone does have any additional questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or reply to the invite, and we will get you your answers to you as soon as we can. I want to go ahead and also let you also know that this is recorded, so we will be sending this afterwards. So those folks who had requested to see it in the chat, or those people who couldn't make it, of course, will have the ability to see it later. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I definitely want to thank Mike and Tim for joining us today, taking the time to give us a little bit of their insights of what they're seeing. I know it's a thing that changes all the time. So I'm sure even in a couple of months, the story will change a bit more. And I know that there's some exciting things that are coming down the road on the TierPoint side as well as the Microsoft side. So we will definitely keep in touch and keep everyone updated with future content around this topic. So again, remember, we have that assessment that was just mentioned. It's in the chat. Here is the QR code. And again, thanks everyone for the time today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will talk soon. Thanks again. Bye.